I'm going to keep this short. Forgive the sound quality. I am currently having some CPU issues. Today on Pragmagick, I am so pleased and thrilled to announce the unearthed, previously thought lost live conversation recorded last February with Sacred Lattice founder and black math magician Cicely Rogers. It couldn't have come at a better time, and truly, like it was dispatched from the hands of God, it was laid right here for me to release. So without further ado, here is my wonderful conversation with Cicely Rogers.
Checks.
Yeah?
I want to check.
We're going to do this for...
Like rice checks, corn
Is it
checks.
Oh, good.
The whole time.
Good.
I heard it shuts off after about 12 minutes, 15 tops. So, I don't know.
Well, welcome, everybody.
Hi.
On this snowy fucking day in
yeah.
Portland.
It was
I'm
very
here
pretty.
with Cicely Rogers
Hey, y'all.
from Sacred Lettuce. Get it? It's Sacred Lattice. I was being a dick. Cicely, we just met tonight.
We did.
We've been talking, and I know you through Bran, who's also going to be a guest tonight.
Bran.
I'm reading through this Sacred Lattice website. I wanted to read something to the audience to kind of give them an idea
Okay.
of what that is.
Is it our opening page?
It is. I think it says a lot.
It makes
Was
me
it
really
crafted?
happy. It was crafted. This Sacred Lettuce it started with me trying to have a side hustle and turned into something different. 4 of us came together to put it together, and this story was written by one of the 4, but definitely created, synthesized. The things that person pulled from came from all of us. So it's definitely, it's a joint. Yeah, it's a super joint thing.
As far as the manifesto goes, and there is another manifesto which I'll touch on later, but to begin, in a time when oil robbed from the ground was valued more than the blood robbed from black and native bodies, in a place where the labor of colonized people was used to desecrate our impossibly beautiful, amazingly complex earth by those who see the world's subjugation as its proper role, in a time when spirits and bodies were connected by the thinnest strands and the order of the day was assimilate or die, a sacred lattice was born, a honeycomb of hope, sparks of electric light in the dark, a micro-shift, a changing tide of pathways back to the earth. And that's just the beginning of it. But I think it's beautiful because we're talking about now this organization that you, I feel like are the instigator of.
It is. I like to get stuff done more than I like to be known for stuff, so I never talk about it as being my idea, but everybody else always does, and they're on me to try to be more honest about that. So yes, it was my brainchild, if you
and this
will.
is
and then we together, though. It couldn't have happened. Like, an idea is not such a thing. It couldn't have happened without these other people.
It takes a lot of voices. And it's amazing to me in this climate, whether it be political or otherwise, that how important it is for finding that minority metaphysical communion.
So yes to metaphysical communion, and it certainly can feel like a minority thing at times, especially like as somebody who lives in the United States, like obviously just like founded under colonialism and all of its attendant accoutrements of evil. It can feel like a minority thing, and certainly when we came together, it seemed like it, but I think one of the things that becomes clearer and clearer is that, in fact, it's not minority. Like, the reality is, at some point, everybody was indigenous to somewhere. The reason why, you know what I'm saying? Indigeneity, you know, and like, sure, it's complicated. And
maybe
like,
that's a common misnomer that it has to be a POC thing.
So, I mean, it does. It is I would say that in my opinion, at this point, indigeneity is generally synonymous with not whiteness. That's what it comes down to.
Sure.
Like the advent of whiteness and what whiteness demanded, what it took for people who were from indigenous, from European places to become white.
Yeah.
Was what colonialism and its attendant evils did. So what happened is that people who became white, they shed their indigeneity in order to do so. So does that make sense? So there's nothing specific about indigeneity or connection to land or connection to space and place and spirit. Nothing about that requires melanin.
Sure.
Right? But in as far as like where we currently are in this particular.
I wanted to get
Yes.
because I think it's avidly important, especially in Portland these days.
Absolutely.
And so, how hard was that to kind of conjure or cull together a group of people that had these? Because you talk within Sacred Lattice, you do courses. Why don't we go back and talk about what
just
Sacred
what it is
Lattice
a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's called Sacred Lattice Collective School. We envision it as a meeting place, a town hall. We want it to be a place where people take classes and learn how to make tinctures and learn about herbs. We want it to be a space and a kind of more like loose sense of possibility.
Sure.
So there are classes that we have in mind. I'm a teacher, so I was very interested in the curriculum. The kind of basic curriculum right now looks like what to me was useful as I began to build my magical practices. So that looks like elements. That looks like connection to spirit. That looks like a class on connection to your intuition. Potentially, definitely connection with the ancestors, maybe a tarot class, maybe an astrology class, that sort of thing. But so that's the curriculum of that piece. That's kind of how those classes go. We also offer, we have people who travel come and offer classes, not last weekend, but 2 weekends ago, I guess, the weekend of the 4th, 5th, and 6th, we had 2 people come in. One, Blanca, did classes about plants and dreams. And someone else named Berenice did a class about limpias, which is a Mexican healing practice, I think is probably the easiest way to say it. So we have classes that we have offered. We have people come in to offer classes. We made a few zines, we table. We table and offer the zines and the sprays. We have a spray that we make called, we call it the Keep the Fuckery at Bay spray. We sell the spray and we sell our herb packets. And,
Sure.
So that's kind of where it's at now. It's also in flux, it's a collective and it's really slow going.
I know how you feel.
And I'm not used to that kind of thing. I'm just like a pretty type A, pretty perfectionistic math teacher person who's used to just like saying something and then making it happen. It was not difficult to find each other. It has been a practice in a lot of different ways to work with each other and to how do we make sure that this place does the things that we each as individuals need without making it so narrow that other people can't get their needs met. How do we, is it more important that it be what I thought it was when I thought it was going to be a side hustle, or is it more important that this place be a place for everybody?
Did that come initially just from a side hustle? Did you think
I was hoping, yeah.
So where did that come from? Where did you get to a point where you said that like I can't bestow this on people monetarily?
Basically, that's a really good question. I came to that place because I have stage 4, also known as metastatic breast cancer, and have for quite some time. I was a middle school math teacher. I'm no longer able to teach. I'm on Social Security disability, which is great that I have that. And, a bitch likes high-end face products. So I needed a side hustle. And I have a dog,
Word, yeah.
I like to eat food sometimes.
It's funny because like my question when I meet other like intuitive healers and teachers in any kind of metaphysical realm, my question is like where were you when you got to the point where you thought hey, I could bestow this and get some money back. And
Fucking
yours
desperate.
is the most necessity.
Yeah, my shit was desperate, and it was very difficult when I first got into magic. I felt very strongly about. I did not feel strongly about other people charging or not charging necessarily. I try to worry about myself as much. I mean, I'm a judgmental bitch, but not value judgment, not like good or bad,
Right,
so I try to worry about myself. But for myself, I had always felt very strong. I remember from the beginning saying to myself, I just can't imagine a situation in which I would feel like I needed to charge for magic. I'd said that phrase over and over and over, and I hadn't imagined it until I needed a side hustle. I just did not. I couldn't physically do the things that I used to do.
I read that all the time, and it's like, why don't we pay our teachers enough? Like, honestly, you're a teacher in the public school system.
Sure.
And like that's a common thread. Like, why wouldn't if the knowledge is free, why wouldn't we give something back to the proprietors of it?
Totally. And I really lucked out. Like, I'm not. I wanted a side hustle really for expensive face stuff and like luxuries. Do you know what I mean?
I
like,
love it.
It's not. I'm not like, if I didn't have this hustle, I wouldn't be able to pay my bills. I would be able to eat. I wouldn't be able to eat as well or as nicely.
Right.
But it wouldn't, whatever, like, turns out not eating New Seasons, it doesn't fucking kill you. Like, grocery outlets just fine. You know what I'm saying? For some perspective. And still, it was so bad that I had went from, like, I cannot imagine what it would be to what it would be. So that, for me, that always puts me in mind of, like, what about people who do not have, social security, who do not have a wide and deep support system of people who have money. Well, you know what I'm saying? So like that, there's certainly yes with that, but as far as paying teachers enough, but it is, I don't know. There's a lot to talk about with what it is to charge people for
it brings me back
magic.
to the modern idea of a kind of guruless person finding a guru who should be completely devoid of all, monetary or, whatever
like
wants.
Pure, right, no desire.
Floats around and is just fine. But I feel like
it's
more entwined to understand, like, just your little passions about the little sweets of life,
And like, whatever, like, we're all in capitalism.
Word.
Ain't no way out till you die.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, thanks, communism.
And Obama. So it's, but that is it. So it started as a side hustle, and then it turned into this other thing, and there's all these people involved, and the pieces that I was the most passionate about was like entirely the classes piece. But when we started, kind of nobody cared about the first classes that we did. I did an ancestor class that I felt sure that people were going to be stoked on because that's what people had said they were stoked on.
Yeah.
I'm a super nerd, so I am a cautious sort. I'm not a jump in before I do research, so I was very careful about making sure that I listened to what everybody said they wanted, and then created a curriculum that was exactly that. And then nobody wanted that thing, so then it became like, for myself, I was like, oh fuck, what am I doing? Like, I've ruined this. But luckily, there were other people who were like, it's cool, we'll just try something different.
You give me so much to unpack, because like my big question as far as like creating a curriculum or a syllabus, right? You got to shape it to the consumer, because like you said, we're in a capitalist society. Mm-hmm. So what are the common threads of a consumer that's into metaphysics?
Right. Totally.
Like, what are they looking for? What are they okay to do?
Totally. And then too, you think about like I think something that made it easier for me to do that piece, because even though no one has come to the classes, I think that is more I don't think that's the other people in the collective assure me that it's not about the classes not being interesting or people not being interested. There are other factors that make it so that people aren't showing up. So we're working on those. But
with extraneous factors,
always with coming up with what the curriculum was going to be, something that made it possible to feel like I did okay with that was a piece of it was the fact that this came from people who, for various reasons, felt either actively cut off, or that an attempt had been made to cut them off from their ancestral ways of knowing, and that also they saw people who profited from the cutting off of us from our ancestral ways, actively profiting from that, and also spouting bullshit. You know what I'm saying? Like white people, like, oh, come to this tent. We're gonna do a hot house, and people, or what's it called, a sweat lodge, and people fucking dying. Like that's the kind of shit that made us be like, what? We can do something.
That famous quote unquote guru. It was in like The Secret and all that shit. That happened.
Yes, like, and it
killed people.
And it's pretty common. And if there's all kinds of reasons, of course, right? Like, things are fucked and it's pretty sick out there, and so people are like really open and like wanting something that makes sense, that feels real, that to kind of balance the fucked upness, right? And so that plays out.
When does it come into play? Like maybe not taking advantage. That's not the right term. But like when you're thinking of it in capitalist terms, which I have a hard time with. When thinking about something that's so deep and philosophical, and metaphysical, and so necessary for everybody, like that's what I mean. Like, where do you, like, when does it come in that like I've found a facet where I can bridge the two?
Got ya.
You know,
I think for me, and for us, it came from the sense that we saw people wanting to connect in this way, but not knowing where to start.
Right.
And I just have I'm a math person and a linguist. I think about things in terms of features and what they do. Right. So that's really how
I don't get into that.
You know,
sure.
I don't have any interest, and I didn't have any interest in, as a school, we don't have any interest in like saying what you should believe or how you should practice, or what areas of belief you need to have, what pantheons you need to work with, what things you need to be initiated in, what things you need to leave behind, like how you should connect, how you should conceptualize whatever cosmology that you might decide you want to come up with or connect to. Like, I personally, I have no interest in that, partly because of what we were talking about earlier. I'm not an initiate of anything. A lot of this came... I have a friend who's like, mystic is the word for people who are like you just listen deeply and then you do what feels right. And even hearing that makes my stomach hurt. Like, oh, too. Never call me a mystic ever again. And she always teases me. She's like, it's just what you are. But whatever. Like, you know, that's how I came to it. I'm not an initiate. I'm not a hereditary witch. You know what I mean? It just. In my late 20s, I got into it, and I got moved. It was a
hero's journey.
I got moved to do all this stuff, and so between that and the way that my brain works, it made sense to be like, well, here are some threads that I see. Being able to be in your body and to live in your body, and if you can't live in it all the time, to at least connect to it. Because when I started this journey, I didn't live in my body. I lived in my head, and my body was something that I dragged around to do stuff with.
I feel like that's like the biggest dichotomy between this journey, whichever way you take it, is that you have people that are very ceremonial, mathematical, logical, and you have people that are, you know, shooting from the hip, very, very heart-oriented, very, you know, almost an extreme dichotomy of that. And for you, what I want to talk about as a math teacher, as a logician, you know, as a your title is on Sacred Lattice, a black math magician, which I think is the baddest fucking title.
It's like I'm terrible at names. It's like the best name I've ever come up with. The coolest. I don't name, and everything else I name is like descriptive. So for months, Sacred Lattice was called POC PDX Witch School, and everything I did for months because I have no imagination. Black math magician, I like shot my load all at once, and that was. Never again. But it's good, right? I did good. Like, it was worth it.
He-spirited you.
Definitely.
But yeah, what I was going to say was you having the foresight as a logician, like coming from a background of very technical, logical thinking, like how did you stumble in onto this and thinking, holy shit, like, you know, math is just one part. Maybe that's just a human part of recognizing patterns and ideas. There's something behind it. Where did that come from?
I think my father's Muslim and my mother's Baptist, and I was raised in the Bible Belt, and I was not indoctrinated with religion. Always interested in...
It was around.
It was around, but I just was interested in it. But I've always been, I didn't buy it. Like it just wasn't for me. The things that was on offer didn't. Not that I didn't see why anybody wanted it, but for me, I was too much of a feminist. I hated colonialism too much. Right. It didn't really work. And then until I was 27, I was basically like agnostic. Only reason I didn't call myself atheist was because I mean, the world's so fucking big. Who could know? Right. Like, I remember I read in Ursula K. Le Guin's The Compass Rose. R.I.P. Right? You know, yeah, R.I.P. for sure. There's a story where people who think that they're scientists turn out, spoilers coming up, turn out that that's not so much, they think that they're scientists on an island, but actually they're the dream of some, like, you know, masturbating 17-year-old boy is what ends up happening in this story and shit. Like, I read a lot of science fiction and fantasy. Fair. It really affected me. So I had a sense of like how potentially big things were, and I was always concerned with questions of like what it is to know. How do we know that we know? How do we know what we know what we know? Totally. Yeah. And definitely always saw patterns, kind of driven by it. I was telling Keith before, I'm not especially creative. I'm very linear, very deeply kind of rigid and nerdy, and you know, for most of my life, I wanted to like be caught up in this ecstasy of religion. I wanted that, and it just never.
There's a romance.
Yeah, I would see it. I remember being like, maybe if I was Catholic, or maybe if I had been raised Jewish, like maybe it's just this kind of. There's something that I would see it. I would see it in church. I'm from the South, and we're black, so we go to church even if I didn't have to believe it. And
like Judaism too, that's like more communal, like more than anything.
Sure.
You
know, and the spirit, and I would see it, and I could see that was real. There was no question whether or not that piece was real. Certainly these people are having an ecstatic experience. There's no question about that. Right. Certainly, and like all these people are having the same thing happen. Who the fuck am I to say they're not having it happen? But it just never touched me. It just never touched me. And then I came out here, and a friend took me to a reclaiming Samhain. It must have been 2006. That was the year I moved here. And it's fucking cold outside, and I'd never really been this kind of cold. And I'm like walking around at I think it's at Peninsula Park, and they're trancing, and there's fires. There's trancing, and there's fires, and you know, it's like Witches the musical. Everyone's in there like glitter, you know, and like it's super fun. I love Samhain, my fave. And I all of a sudden, like, found myself, right, and I had lived in my head, right? I can't say that enough. I had always just lived in my head. I'd always just lived in my head, and all of a sudden, I'm at this ritual, and I'm like having some other kind of experience, and I'm like, is this happening? Is this really happening? Because it feels like something is happening, but maybe. And so, right, so I'm going through all that, and is it real, and is it not real, and how could I even gauge in this moment? And when I stop thinking and trying to gauge, like, I certainly feel different. I'm feeling a feeling I've never felt before. I'm 27, I've never felt this feeling, and I searched out other feelings to feel, right? And so, you know, all this thing happened. It's like I'm in a trance, and it's like, oh shit, I'm trancing, and it just was so interesting and so different, and I was so curious. And then I ended up like making a vow. I'm that bitch who's always like making a solemn vow and then having to like follow that vow through.
You're coming to it as with a scientific mind.
Sure.
You're like, you know, I'm gonna experiment with this, expecting results.
And
you
do have this.
I'm gonna.
It's true. Bail. And definitely there's a certain amount of giving yourself over to the experiment if you're gonna actually see it through. Right. You got to make sure if you're checking to see how the ball is gonna fall, you got to drop the ball in the same way every time 100,000 times, right? Like,
yeah, I know this is probably a loaded question, but like, how do you correlate? You know, I often think of magic when I talk to a layman about it, or not a layman, even just I'm a healthy skeptic still myself. Sure. Because, you know, as I know you do, you look for results, and the results work. This is why I do this. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times I often bring it back down to psychology tactics or psychological machinations that make it, you know, me talking to my subconscious. And I would think that someone with a logical background would kind of correlate it to some
like wonder about
science.
That. Yeah. You know, I don't know if I ever did. Like, it was so...
You kept it separated.
I don't know if I kept it separate. For all that I never lived in my body, I've always trusted myself. And I just started to have these different experiences. Things just were different. I was doing the same things that I had. Everything else was the same. The only thing that had changed was this one variable. And this changed variable changed everything else.
And the
Does that make sense? And the variable was, I went to this ritual, and all of a sudden I had a feeling that I hadn't had before. I had an experience. And does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So like the fact that was enough for me. I didn't need to. At the time, my ex, lovely man, he was an he was and is an atheist. We met under this. We had these shared values around this thing, and then I get magic, and he was kind of taken aback, but like maybe it was going to be okay. But very quickly it went from kind of like, I talk about it in terms of going from spirituality to religion, and when I say that, I just mean that it became central to my life.
It's
Does
like
that make
amorphous
sense?
to a system.
Yeah, and it just became central to my life. It became an anchor. It became a well. It became a hearth. It just became this thing that was my life began to be built around. And when that shift happened, it got kind of weird between us because he was like, I just feel like I don't know who you are. Like I thought we had the same values. Like I thought the scientific method was what we were here for. Right. And you are having this experience and I couldn't share it. Like I was telling him, well, I'm experiencing these things.
Yeah. The whole point of it is to be obliterated.
I mean, from some people, and that's where different people. Yes, for me, I hear you, but not for everybody, right? Like, but it just was like it was difficult. I'd hit a point where I could say words, but it wasn't sufficient. I couldn't quantify it. I could not show to another person my evidence that I had experienced, my empirical evidence. It couldn't be shared.
It wasn't a usable language.
Totally. Yeah. And it ended up being fine. Like we had one pretty bad yelling. We arguing people, pretty bad yelling match about it. And then he's like, okay, I'm going to wait it out. And pretty quickly he realized I was so much happier. Like once I got into it, once I decided, okay, I'm gonna learn. I'm a nerd, so I got a bunch of books and I read a bunch of books and I set aside a part in the place in the house for an altar and I agonized over whether or not I was being respectful enough or not respectful enough, or if I was gonna be messing with powers beyond my ken to my detriment. You know what I mean? I did all that, but I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna keep with it. I'm gonna trust myself. I'm gonna try to trust my ancestors, because the ancestors had always been, that was a piece that piece wasn't new. Ancestor reverence, ancestor worship, ancestor respect. That's just what we do. And when I say we, I mean both black people and people who are not black, who are not white. Their whiteness, a huge piece of whiteness requires the throwing away of ancestors. That change that people made when they accepted colonialism and accepted the choice to be white. That's the word is susto that I learned from Brandon, from my friend Letty. It's like a shock, like a soul loss. There's a severing that happens there. Well, for all the terrible things that colonialism and its attendant accoutrements of evil have wrought, the breaking us from our ancestors is impossible. So that piece, I already had that piece and I trusted that piece. So I had that piece. I was having these experiences. I trusted myself about these experiences, even if I couldn't share them. And I was curious. And so does that make sense? So I just kind of kept following those things to see where are they going to take me. And
it brings me back to this part in the manifesto that's on Sacred Lattice, which I love. It's one of the bullet points in it is, we envision a movement that supports individualism. Just joking. We envision a movement that supports individuals' decolonization process of mind, body, heart, and spirit. The decolonization process of mind, body, heart, and spirit. And I know that obviously from an amorphous standpoint, because, I don't have the ancestral, connection to that. But I do get it as far as a psychological rebellion. Does that make
Sure,
sense?
sure. Like a rebellion or a denial, right? Like
Right,
you're gonna
yeah.
fuck you.
I am
I
not-
deny. I
I'm
deny
not the
that-
patterns that were
Totally.
imparted on me.
Sure, sure,
you
sure.
know.
And I don't have to live by them. I don't have to
Right.
structure my life that way. I don't have to reify them. I don't have to give them power. And sure, all that.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I love that. But there's something to be said about, with this art collective or whatever that we're doing and stuff, there was no clear focal, I want to say humanitarian, but that's probably not the right word. It wasn't that it was too amorphous about the confluence between art and magic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you guys have such a direct, perfect main line, to what is honestly necessary.
I think the
in
precision.
these torrid times,
It's true. Also, Tor's a great store. I think the precision is real. I think that comes from we had all in our. So for some perspective about the 4 people who started it, we're all queer. One of us has of Jamaican descent. That's not me. One of us is Persian and Cuban. One of us is Mexican, and one of us is Mexican, but has super strong roots to their indigenous culture and language, and grew up their whole life involved in that. And then I am what I think of as just Black American. So we all come from very different spaces. We come from completely different parts of the country. All of us are from different places, and we all do different things. Pretty much everybody but me is a plant outside person.
Right.
A couple animal people. I'm the only one who's kind of super.
Yeah, let's talk about
nerdy,
the different courses.
I will. Let me finish this though. But despite the fact that we came from all these places, the thing that we had in common was that experience that I said, this reaching, this longing, this wanting, this feeling our ancestors pushing us and asking things from us and feeling like we didn't know where to turn and we had to figure it out on our own, while at the same time watching the ways that, because colonialism, right, the material support of white supremacy, how that plays out, watching our stuff be stolen and kept from us and bastardized and sold and stolen and kept from us and bastardized and stole. And then people are like, it's just really sad you don't know more about your culture. I feel like if I was blah, 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 just the number of things that people, and not people who are trying to be ugly.
Right.
For some people that matters. I don't really care about intentions, but intentions matter to some people. People just straight up ignorance that still does damage. It just was very clear what needed to happen. That's what I mean. It wasn't. There's a way that this is. This for people was about what am I trying to say? This was necessary. This is medicine to us. Does that make sense? Medicine for we're feel like we're bleeding out, so we're trying to both staunch the bleeding and figure out how to. We're trying to just do it all, and I think that is definitely what helped with the precision. That and the ancestors, as always.
It
just
makes
telling
sense
us what
as
to
much
do.
as it can.
Totally. Totally. Okay, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you, so you were talking about the different aspects with Sacred Lattice and what do you guys teach. What did you come together and realize were the pillars of metaphysics? I know tarot is obviously one of them.
I'll be honest, that was the curriculum and stuff was definitely more me. I had already, before I had decided to, when it was still just
the logician?
And just I love writing lesson plans. I like teaching middle school math. No one gives a fuck about that. But it's interesting if you can make it interesting. And so I really like that piece.
You've got
of it.
the
That's
hardest
the puzzle.
job in the world. You know that.
Oh God, the best. I
Middle
love them.
school math.
I love them
Are you
so
kidding me?
much. Oh God, it's so cool. It's so cool. Anyways, it's like a whole other thing. But so I had already come to it pretty clear about what I felt like was important. And so, but that's that piece. I think I started talking about it earlier. And then it just, the ancestor piece, obviously non-negotiable. The being in the body piece. Well, the elements can be a way to connect to the body. The spirit versus intuition piece. I think for me, that was about the fact that listening to your intuition is just generally a good idea, and I think that generally, certainly people who experience any kind of institutional oppression, even one single kind, let alone multiple kinds, we are taught over and over and over not to trust ourselves, not to trust what we think, not to trust what we experience, and instead to like take all of our trust and everything that we know and to put it in something outside of us that is every day trying to kill us, right? Like that is what it is to experience institutional oppression. And so, oh gosh, I just lost it. Fuck, hold on.
Oh, we're hanging.
Okay, right. So the intuition piece was really important for that reason. Like you got to build up your intuition. You gotta know who's in there, what's in there. You got to trust yourself if you're gonna be working with powers beyond your ken, right? Because even if it can go bad, I've lucked out. I haven't had anything go too bad, but I've heard horror stories from people about, how not being connected and prepared enough to themselves and their desires and what they wanted and what they needed led to setting things in motion that did not do the thing they wanted it to do, or did the thing that they wanted it to do in a way that was damaging. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
So that's where
real simple in that sense.
Really simple. I've always thought, and I'm a bitch. I'm scared. I'm very careful about what I want to do. I'm super precise. So that's where the intuition piece came, and then for the class, the connecting to spirit. Personally, for me, that is one that I felt like should be separate from elements, because there are people who are pagans who do not have a deity. Right? Like there's nothing about a connection to the earth that requires a need for a god of any sort. So I wanted there to be the chance for that, because that matters to people. People have connections with various shiny ones or deities or angels, or there's all kinds of things that people call them. And I wanted there to be space for that, but I did not want everybody to have to do that if they weren't interested, right? Yeah. Like nothing about paganism requires that. So elements was about getting in the body and also connecting to the earth. I guess that's the other piece. To me, when people ask me what magic is, I think that this quote comes from someone named Dion Fortune. I will say I'm not especially well read about like metaphysical theory and stuff. That's just not how. So if I get something wrong, know that up front it could happen. But this idea of magic as the changing of consciousness at will. Yes. And that's when I tell people what magic is, that's how I think of it first, right? Like it's a changing of consciousness at will. That to me is what magic is. I personally identify as a witch. When people ask me, well, what does that mean to you to be a witch? To me, that means, number one, right? Like I hate patriarchy and I want to scare people who love it first. But also, to me, being a witch is about the fact that I work my will upon the world. It's not just that I have a will, but that I feel like it's totally fucking fine for me to make this world or these worlds that I inhabit. I want to be a change agent. Does that make sense? Yeah. Whether in magic and not, a change agent. I like it. Whether in magic or not in magic. That's why I went into middle school math teaching. So like that is where that sense of the witch piece comes from. Like so I think of myself as a pagan because I connect what goes on with the earth to cycles of the earth and things about that. I feel connected to that as somebody who lives and is connected to this earth, right? Like I believe in relationship in that way. I don't think it's possible to be on this earth, at least on the world spinning around this sun, this world. It is like separation isn't possible. Everything is literally always in relationship with something else. It's impossible.
Back to that hermetic as above, so below.
Oh, sure. There you go. Yeah. So there's that piece. So that's the pagan piece. The magic piece is the changing of consciousness at will. The witch piece is I'm gonna work my will upon the world. And so, I went into it knowing that those were the things that I wanted to prepare. Those are the things that I believe. And so then I just began to look at, because there's other stuff, right? Like I know people who practice Lukumi. There are people who practice Santeria in this. And those are just the like African diasporic religions. There's so many other pantheons and things that people practice, So I just wanted to, I don't know, I guess it's just my like categorizing brain. I looked at the things that people do. People make various sorts of art to connect. People sing and dance, which is a kind of art to connect. You got to be in your body. You got to know something about the world. You know, I'm a terrible gardener, but I like to watch what happens, right? There's a certain amount of observation that is required if you're going to be involved in metaphysical and magic things,
Makes
right?
perfect sense to me as the black math magician, as a school teacher, that you would write the syllabus for how this would all come.
Yeah, that's just
people,
it. And it's also, I mean, the number of curriculums that I am like having going on at any time.
Sure.
I just think about it a lot, you know. But again, that piece, it's so. There's lots of different ways that people of color feel like either magic isn't for them or isn't allowed them, or if they get in, it's not going to. There's just all kinds of shit around it. And it also feels so big, right? Like if someone's like, even if someone were to be like, I want to be a witch or I want to do magic, like, do I need to buy a whole bunch of stones? Do I need to learn how to grow plants? Like, what are the things, you know? So
a critical thinking book. That's what I recommend to people.
Yeah. Well, it's key, right?
Yeah.
But it's the connection pieces and the you know, the connection to me, the connection to yourself, the connection to the earth, and also with for me, with the witch piece, like the working the will upon the world, it matters. Like this earth is beautiful. I mean, there's all kinds of fucked up shit that happens that, like, you know, our capacity for chaos and devilment and, you know, foolishness and wildness is like huge, but that's not the only thing our capacity for is huge. You know what I'm saying? I just, you know, I don't
micro and macro.
Yeah, and I'm not content to. Oh, well, that's how you know. Like, I've never been a things work out for the best kind of person. Maybe they do, but maybe they don't. Like, maybe they need a fucking nudge.
You have no idea how refreshing that is to hear.
In Portland?
Well, no. Well, sure, yeah, I'm macro, but in the micro sense, like for somebody being from a logistical mind to divvy magical practice into that and be like, I don't want to fuck with, you know, the weight of the world in that sense. I want to do it as much as I can in all senses. So, Cicely, thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope I answered your questions.
I will talk more.
Oh, great.
Because, no.
Thanks, y'all.
You haven't.
Oh, sorry.
No. Then that's the whole point. Is
more talking.
Raise more questions. No, but give us what's on the horizon.
We're doing a ritual soon, Sacred Lattices, but it's only for people who are eligible to join Sacred Lattice. So if you know people who meet that criteria, which you can find at Sacred Lattice, feel free to let us know. We're doing a Welcome Back to Spring ritual. And I think that's about it. We've got some like end of winter things happening. They haven't shown themselves all the way yet. You know what I mean?
Welcome to February.
Mm-hmm. Fake out February. Thanks so much for having me, Keats and WE THE HALLOWED and Waypost.
Everyone, Cicely Rogers. SACREDLATTICE.com, the tarot blog, which we didn't get into.
Oh, right. The tarot blog is Blacklight Tarot. I do tarot readings, too, so y'all can find me, and rune readings. And I'm pretty good to talk to.
Forgive the sound quality again. I'm having some CPU problems. If you'd like to support the show outside of a like, a review, or all the other social media whatevers, you can do a one-time PayPal donation at that email address is pragmagick, pragmagick @gmail.com, or there's tons of reward tiers if you were to subscribe to our Patreon. And that Patreon is patreon.com/